progress.
And moving on, the National Rifle Association, with its nearly 5 million members, just wrapped up its annual convention in Houston and again highlighted the culture war that exists in the United States on gun control. But the party didn't end before taking aim at President Obama's gun initiative and touting their success at defeating it.
Incoming President Jim Porter, an Alabama attorney, addressed thousands of delegates Saturday with an attack on President Obama.
President Obama demanded that his followers extract revenge. And revenge is what is motivating the president's unrelenting attacks on gun owners today.
It's not the first time for Porter. In a speech last year to the New York Rifle and Pistol Association, he called Mr. Obama the, quote, fake president. Porter and other NRA leaders promised to oppose any renewed effort to pass background check legislation.
The NRA will go the distance, no matter what it takes, not one single inch.
That is the truth. It is not ridiculous.
Across the street from the convention center, protesters held signs and debated NRA members. Houston resident David Cervantes came out after seeing news stories about the convention.
Having guns and such firepower that can kill, and the culture of this is okay or accepting, I'm not okay with that.
Pat Maish helped to disarm the man who shot Representative Gabby Giffords in Tucson.
I'm hoping that the NRA leadership, who I believe is saturated in blood, I'm hoping that they will finally get a soul and do the right thing and try to stop some of these murders.
Rick Ector attended the NRA convention, and he's with us via Skype from Southfield, Michigan. He writes the blog Legally Armed in Detroit. Rick, thank you very much for being here with us. We do appreciate it.
Well, I definitely appreciate the opportunity to join your show today.
You have a very unique story about how you've come to believe in the rights of gun ownership. Will you quickly just tell that story?
Yeah, there was a period of time, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, where I was completely, like a lot of people in our country, ambivalent to the gun rights war. I was a professional, homeowner, family guy, just went about my business and lived my life. One night when I came home from work, I was approached by 2 gentlemen who proceeded to commit an armed robbery against me in my backyard. It was at that point in time that I thought that, well, it's time for me to exercise more involvement in my personal protection. I sought out information to get a concealed pistol license here in the state of Michigan. I got all the training, went through all the background checks, purchased a firearm. I carry daily. I then wanted to enhance my training and help others in my community make the same decision that I did, or at least give them the option of taking on an active role in their personal protection. And I became a firearms instructor, certified through the National Rifle Association. I'm also a training counselor, membership recruiter, and I'm a diehard fan.
All right. And let me just ask you this question, because it seems like you did everything right. You did it the right way. And I don't think anybody can fault you, at least on the last part of President Obama's gun initiative, and that was universal background checks, that 90% of those who are polled support it, and the NRA seemed to run a victory lap over pulling that down. What is the harm in that initiative, and wouldn't some sort of gun reform perhaps have taken the guns out of the hands of your attackers, not necessarily keep the gun out of your hand?
Well, there's a couple of things just right off the bat that, and in the way you phrased the question. Yes, there was some polling that came out that said that yes, 90% of people, whether they're the general population or whether they even claim that it was 90% of National Rifle Association members. I questioned the validity of that results from that survey. I think at the end of the day, when we had the debate in the U.S. Senate, everyone was asking, well, okay, how are you going to take this position when so many people want these background checks? I think the senators in the U.S. Senate did listen to their constituents, because here's the thing. When you look at other polls that say that this gun rights issue is not the most important thing that's in the country, amongst people who are gun rights activists, gun owners, concealed carriers who carry for personal protection, it is the most important issue. And with regards to whether we feel that we're pushing back on something that some people feel is reasonable, when you really look at it, the whole argument, the whole debate that we're having, I think is it's not addressing the root cause. I think if you ask anybody, whether they're a gun owner or someone who vehemently hates people who practice their right to carry a gun, I think that we all agree that it's important to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and people who have serious mental disorders that may create a situation in which they're harm to themselves or to other people. We all agree
Rick,
on that.
can I jump in here for a second? Can I jump in for a second?
Let me just say this one thing.
All right.
But when you have legislators and even the president come out and say, well, hey, let's push these initiatives, let's push these gun laws that we know won't change any of the mass shooting incidents such as in Connecticut or in Tucson or in Aurora, Colorado, but we're going to do this just for the sake of doing something to show the American people that we're responding, is patently offensive to gun owners and law-abiding citizens that we're not addressing the root cause.
Rick, the assault rifle that was used in the Newtown shooting was an assault rifle that was purchased legally. The 30-plus magazine clip that was used by Gerald Loeffner against Gabrielle Giffords was purchased legally. I think the issue here is for most Americans. Look, your situation is one where, hey, yeah, sure, concealed weapon, you were certainly in a situation where you could have used it at the time. But we're talking about the issue here that most Americans are concerned with, sir, are assault weapons. Who really needs an assault weapon? Who needs one?
Well, in phrasing that question, you know, right off the bat, we're talking politically charged language, because when you listen to what people in the media and in politics, I think they're disingenuous when they label these firearms so-called assault weapons. Here's the thing. An assault weapon, as I understand it as a firearms instructor, is a military-grade firearm that fires either burst or continuous fire when the trigger is pulled. That is not the type of firearm that we're talking about. With respect to these so-called assault weapons, with their position that they're putting in the media, they're spreading falsehoods and characterizations that are not true. And with respect to whether the guns, let me just finish with one point. With respect to whether the guns were purchased legally or not, when you look at just covering the shooting at the school in Sandy Hook in Connecticut, yeah, the gun was purchased legally by the mentally deranged person's mother, but this person clearly had some problems, and he had no qualms about shooting his mother in the head to then steal their guns. This is where criminals get the guns. They don't pass background checks at gun shops to buy these firearms. You know, the guy who committed the crime actually failed the background check, and then when you look at places where President Obama is from, there are 90 federal jurisdictions at the federal level that do background checks at gun shops.
Rick, let me just jump into one of your points before you get too far away from that point, and that is you're bringing up the issue of those who are mentally ill who get their hands on guns and do these heinous acts. What did the NRA say at this convention in terms of money, in terms of resources, in terms of real policy that this organization is willing to do to address the issue of mental illness? Instead of just raising it as an issue, what is the organization willing to do?
From my personal experience, I haven't heard anything that I heard with regards to the mental health issue. Now, I have heard and have seen various members of the National Rifle Association, from Wayne LaPierre to David King, who was then the acting president, say, look, let's address the root cause, let's address the issue, let's take on mental health. And you know what, we've even talked about let's take on concrete measures to protect our children at schools. And the opposing side, the media who has a particular political bent, they just laugh and scoff at the NRA, and they say, hey, arming teachers or putting guns in schools just in case, you know, a low probability of a psychotic person comes in and wants to harm children and teachers.
My question then to you is
unreal.
What can be done to change the tone?
What I've seen,
what can be done, Rick, to change the tone so that a conversation can actually be had by those who are gun supporters, such as yourself, and those who are calling for gun reform? Isn't there some sort of middle ground?
And we're running out of time very quickly, Rick. Very quickly.
I'm not going to necessarily care. I'm going to respond to her question. It's not necessarily middle ground. Let's have middle ground. Let's have a conversation on the real issue at hand. If you're talking about let's take the middle ground between let's decide how many law-abiding citizens we're going to disarm, you know what? There is no middle ground there. However, where we do have agreement, We have agreement that we need to take guns away from mentally ill people and away from criminals. And I think if we have a serious
Rick, I'm very
conversation
sorry.
on
I
how
have
we
to
do
interrupt
that,
you. We're going to lose your satellite, and I don't want you to just go black and wonder why. Listen, thank you very much for your time and your perspective. I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to talk again. It is now time.